let's talk about Weili Zhang. Or more importantly, what's next for Weili? What is next for Weili? That's a good question. Because she lost 2 straight to Rose Namajunas. She's not getting anywhere near that title again as long as Rose holds it. She's going to need a 3, 4, maybe even 5 fight win streak to get back to that title as long as Rose holds that title. Now, Rose not always the most active of fighters. So now you got to figure out what to do with Weili. It's a tough question. Let's look at the strawweight rankings in UFC real quick here. So Zhan's at number 1, Esparza is at number 2, Rodriguez at number 3, Shannon at number 4, Dern at number 5, Nunes at 6. Now, I saw someone in my comments mention probably Zhang versus Dern. I don't see that fight happening. And I'll tell you why. Dern's coming off a loss. Zhang is coming off of 2 straight. UFC wants to promote both of them. They're not going to risk Dern taking 2 straight losses. And they're not going to risk Weili taking 3 straight. Nunes had a fight booked and is injured. Xiaonan's coming off a loss. I don't think they want to risk either of those Chinese fighters taking another loss right now, even to each other. So I don't think they're going to it's going to be Rodriguez. They might try to force Esparza to fighter. Could happen. Of course, the Joanna rematch is an option, but man, that fight was so close. Does UFC want to risk it? Because you know they like Weili there. That's why in my review video of their fight, I said she should fight Gadelha. Gadelha is a very winnable top 10 fight for her. It would be a good tune-up. Gives her time to work on the things that she worked on at Fight Ready to improve them. Things that she should have taken into a tune-up fight instead of the immediate rematch with Rose. On the other hand, Watterson doesn't have a fight booked. I don't believe. Doesn't have anything coming up soon. They could do Weili versus Watterson. Get some Asian on Asian violence going on. They could try to push Hebas, who's coming off a nice win over Jandiroba, but that's a big leap. 10 versus number 1. It's hard to push. That's hard to justify. Lemos and Hill are booked against each other. So, yeah, the UFC is in a quandary right now with Weili because they got to give her a winnable fight, but it can't be such an obvious tune-up fight because the UFC just doesn't work that way. Like, the UFC is never going to give a super, super obvious tune-up fight to a former champion who's just coming out of a title fight. Even if she's lost 2 straight, UFC just does not do tune-up fights like that. I think they should. I think it's smart. That's one thing that boxing does right that MMA, particularly the UFC, gets wrong. They don't do tune-up fights for champs coming off of a loss. Or former champs coming off of a loss. That's why I think it should be Gadelha. The Brotherman says Weili versus Hebas is the fight to make. Or give her an easy fight with Watterson or Gadelha. Yeah, I think Gadelha would be a good one. Or Watterson. With Hebas at number 10, that's just a bit far. Like, number 1 versus number 10, that's a hard one to really justify. That's a huge leap in the rankings for Hebas, considering she just beat a ranked fighter for the first time. So, yeah, it's the UFC's in a quandary with Weili. But right now, I think what Weili needs to do, go back to China, take a little bit of a break, short break, not too long. Then come back here, get back into camp, go back to Fight Ready. Some people are saying that she never should have gone to that. Some of those people were also saying that it was a great idea for her to go there and work with Cejudo ahead of the time. So some people just can't keep the same energy. Not naming names, but I think it was a good idea to go to a U.S. camp and get some training in. One, to not have to deal with the time difference, which is a major thing for fighters coming from Asia to the U.S. It's huge. It's a half a day difference. I think training with an elite camp like Fight Ready with Eric Albarracin, I think that was a great idea for Weili to do. Very smart idea for her to do. The problem is the rematch was made with Rose too quick. Not enough time for her to get those adjustments made and get used to that. It just wasn't. It was just too quick. They should have given her a tune-up fight first. That way, you get into camp, you deal with some new coaching, you deal with putting on some new skills, maybe learning some new things. You take that tune-up fight first, adopt those skills into your system better, get used to fighting a certain way, and then you go back into the title rematch. You never go back into a title rematch right away after getting knocked out like that. That was a really devastating loss for Weili. She never was able to really come to terms with it. Still talking about Rose turning the fans against her. It's like, girl, stop it. Even Henry Cejudo had to tell her, like, listen, you lost and you got to accept it. Stop blaming the loss on, the booing of the crowd. The booing of the crowd had nothing to do with your guard being wide open for kicks, okay? That was something that Rose's camp studied hard, trained for it, and exploited it. Had nothing to do with the crowd booing. So, it's just, yeah, they rushed her into that rematch too quick. Should have taken the tune-up fight first, and now they have to give her a tune-up fight. I think Gedalia Waterson's a good one. Very winnable fight for Weili. But now that Weili, here's another thing. Now that Weili has suffered 2 losses, people are going to start asking, how good was she really? Because she came into UFC, she beat Danielle Taylor. Danielle Taylor got cut after that fight, I believe. She beat Jessica Aguilar. Jessica Aguilar, I believe, got her walking papers after that fight, if I remember correctly. Moving into Bruna Ellen versus Desiree Yanez over at Bellator. So we'll be getting to that in just a second here. So then she fought Tecia Torres. Torres is a good fighter. Beat Torres via decision. That was a good win. That was her first good win in the UFC. Then her very next fight, she gets a title fight against Jessica Andrade in China because, according to the UFC, Andrade was the only one willing to step up and fight her. That was absolutely Weili's best performance in the UFC, bar none. But there were some questions behind that, too, because a lot of people were saying she landed some blows to the back of the head of Andrade in that fight. So there are some questions there. Then she goes toe-to-toe with Joanna for 5 straight rounds, and that was an awesome fight, amazing fight. But she goes toe-to-toe with Joanna, scrapes by in a split decision, then boom, gets knocked out in 1 minute and 18 seconds by Rose, and then loses the split decision to Rose. So naturally, people are going to wonder, were we sold a false bill of goods in Weili? Was she rushed up the ladder too quick? Time is going to tell, because now she's got some rebuilding to do, and she's got a reputation to rebuild. She's got a lot of rebuilding to do, and that's why they need to book her in a tune-up fight. I think Gedalia Waterson would be the right one to do for that. So those are my thoughts on the Weili Zhang situation. I got to turn off that news banner. Okay, so last thing before I go for the evening,